Okay, so tonight, I want you to picture the quiet, sterile halls of a hospital. You know, a place that's supposed to be all about healing and recovery. But what happens when that quiet gets broken by something unseen? What if the building itself holds a sickness that no medicine can cure? We're about to dive into a chilling story from Nagpur, one that suggests some illnesses aren't of the body or even the mind.
And look, this isn't just some campfire tale. This is the story of a nurse, a woman named Reema, and an encounter so unbelievably terrifying, it would completely shatter her reality. It forced her to flee a place she thought was dedicated to saving lives. And it all started, as these things so often do, pretty innocently. A new start, a new city, and a job she hoped would bring some purpose back into her life.
So let's meet Reema. She was a dedicated nurse who built her whole career in Pune. Life was moving right along for her. She was newly married and had just moved to Nagpur to be with her husband's family. And really, on the surface, everything looked perfect. A brand new beginning.
So after she finished her studies in Pune, Reema married into this pretty well-off family in Nagpur. And you know how it is, the whole whirlwind of the wedding and settling in was exciting. But once all that dust settled, this quiet kind of boredom started to creep in. I mean, they had servants to handle all the chores, her new family was busy, and Reema just felt adrift. She really missed the routine, the feeling of purpose that her work gave her. So she decided, that's it, it's time to put the uniform back on. Finding a job wasn't exactly easy, but after a bit of searching, a position finally opened up. It was a real opportunity, a way for her to get back to the life she knew and loved. But this particular hospital, it had a reputation. There were these whispers of something being wrong, a secret Reema was about to hear loud and clear. The hospital was way out on the edge of the city. Kind of remote, pretty isolated, but hey, a job's a job, and Reema was eager to get started. She went in for the interview, all ready to make a great impression, but the interviewer, he had a warning for her. And this really should have been the first giant red flag. Can you just imagine hearing that in a job interview? A direct warning. The interviewer was surprisingly honest. He told her flat out, for some reason, the night shift had become this place of fear. Even the most experienced staff were refusing to work after the sun went down. Reema, of course, had to ask, why? Well, the interviewer had a pretty rational explanation. Or, at least one that sounded rational. He explained that they'd recently had a lot of new patients with severe Alzheimer's, and his theory was that their confusion and maybe even their hallucinations were probably just spooking the other staff. It was a neat, clinical, easy explanation for this growing feeling of dread. Reema thought about it. I mean, she really needed the job, and the hospital promised they'd move her to the day shift as soon as they could. It just seemed like a temporary hassle with a perfectly logical reason behind it. So, she said yes. She accepted the night shift, and in doing so, she stepped right into the darkness that had been waiting for someone new. Her first few weeks were, tiring but normal. The weird hours were tough, but it was just work. And then, a new patient was admitted. And this patient would become the focal point, the very center of the terror that was about to unfold. The new patient was an elderly woman suffering from Alzheimer's. But the thing that immediately struck Reema was her face. She was the spitting image of Reema's own beloved grandmother, who had passed away years before. In that lonely, sterile hospital, this woman felt like a warm, comforting link to her own past. Reema felt this instant connection, this new sense of purpose in taking care of her. So, a few nights later, Reema's doing her rounds, and she finds the old woman wide awake. But she wasn't just awake, she was petrified. Her eyes were just locked onto this empty corner of the room, right by the door, and she was staring like her life depended on it. Reema, of course, sees nothing. She rushes over to her side, asking, "What's wrong? What do you see?" The woman's voice was just this panicked whisper. She pointed with a trembling finger. "That old woman," she said, "she's staring at me." Reema looked again. She saw nothing, just a blank wall and the shadow from the door. She tried to be reassuring, telling the patient that no one was there. But the old woman was not having it. And then came the words that just sent a pure, icy chill down Reema's spine. "Her eyes," the patient whispered, "are glowing red, like a demon's." Now, Reema tried to dismiss it as a hallucination, just a symptom of the disease. But the fear on that woman's face was so real, so raw, it planted this tiny seed of doubt in her mind.
For the next couple of nights, it was the exact same thing. The old woman would wake up, screaming about a figure in the corner. And Reema kept trying to brush it off, just a tragic side effect of a mind that's deteriorating. Until one night, when she learned, in the most terrifying way possible, that the old woman wasn't imagining a thing.
So Reema was in this small supply room, just folding linens. And suddenly, she felt a breath on the back of her neck. So cold, it felt like ice. She spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. Shaken, she turned back to her work, only to feel a distinct, firm hand grab her shoulder. She screamed and jumped back, but the corridor outside was completely empty. And just as she was trying to calm her racing heart, the door to the room, which she'd left wide open, slammed shut with a deafening bang. Reema whipped around to face the door. And there, through the small glass panel, she saw it. Staring right back at her was a woman in a white sari. Her face was horrifically scorched. Her eyes glowed with this evil red light, and her lips were pulled back into the most terrifying, twisted smile Reema had ever seen. She was just frozen in pure, absolute terror. Screaming, Reema finally managed to fling the door open and just ran. Another nurse heard her and came to help, and together they pulled up the security footage, but the camera didn't show the woman Reema saw. It showed something else. Just a split second before the door slammed shut, a hazy white shadow just materializes in the corridor and then vanishes. There was something there. The camera just couldn't capture its horrible face. Reeling from this, this proof that she wasn't going crazy, but absolutely terrified by what she'd just seen, Reema's thoughts were suddenly shattered by a familiar sound. A scream. It was coming from the old woman's room. Reema bolted to the room. The old woman was hysterical, pointing out toward the hallway. She was crying that the terrifying woman, the demon, had just sprinted right past her doorway. And in that instant, this sickening, horrifying realization just washed over Reema. The hallucinations. They weren't hallucinations at all. With her voice shaking, Reema knelt down next to the poor old woman and started asking these desperate questions. Did she have a scorched face? The woman nodded frantically. Were her eyes? Were they glowing red? Yes, yes, she sobbed. Reema took a deep breath, remembering one final, awful detail from that face in the window. And her smile? Did she have 2 broken front teeth? The old woman's eyes went wide with terror as she nodded one last, final time. And that was it. That was the final, horrifying proof she needed. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, she didn't clock out, she just ran. Out of that room, down the hallway, and through the hospital doors into the night. And she never once looked back. The very next morning, she emailed her resignation. Her return to nursing was over, ended by a nightmare she knew she could never, ever unsee. Reema's story is such a chilling reminder that some fears just can't be explained away by science or medicine. It really makes you ask, doesn't it? In those moments when we are at our weakest, in the very places we go to heal, are we ever truly alone? Or does being so vulnerable just open our eyes to the things that have been lurking in the shadows all along?